Welcome back everyone to Kazimar's Fantasy Battle Reports. Long time no see, but finally back with another battle report for you guys. Got 11 battles over 2 tournaments to share with you over the hopefully coming week or two before I get back into the grind of work. So first battle I've got for you is Game 1 from Guardcon 2018. My list for this tournament is the Vampire Covenant. So we've gone with a list very similar to Food Monster from Team Australia for the recent ETC, built upon 2 very killy, tough to kill Vampire Lords. Lots of core units, pick up the secondary objectives with scoring, good chaff, and then the main difference between my list and his, if you've seen it, is I have 2 units of Vampire Knights, a lot more resilient. My local meta has a lot of Pyro and Divination typically, so their 1-up armor save is going to be very difficult for people to get through. We also tend to often have a lot of shooting in our meta, particularly strength 3, so again very resilient choice. Scoring again, and mainly also I don't actually own the Vampire Spawn models to make use of that list that Akhtar had. So my game 1 opponent happens to have probably the list I least wanted to face. One of the top players in New Zealand, always there or thereabouts for finishing towards the top of the tournament. And we've got Infernal Dwarves, and the key things that make this list difficult for me is the alchemy. The characters are not particularly easy to kill, so I need the vampires for them. He's got a little bit of shooting that can pick off my chaff and cause a few problems, and then quite a few Kadim, and of course the immortals that will hold up fairly well against my vampire knights as well, if I don't get the charge off. So number of threats there, particularly alchemy, which is a very hard counter to my vampire knight units. So looking forward to a good game against EJ, and hopefully we will come out on top with this one, but wasn't feeling hopeful going into this match. So there's his spells, and no surprise he's taken Molten Copper and Quicksilver Lash, which is going to cause me a few problems. For my spells, almost every game I take this setup. Be interested in your feedback on other suggestions perhaps, but I found taking the 2 magic missiles with the Breath of Corruption and the Pentagram of Pain gives me some really solid offensive options. The double Arise is pretty useful and necessary as a VC player, and then we've got the bound spell as well to summon some more chaff, so generally works out pretty well. So just before we get into this first game, apologies for what you're about to see. This is probably one of the ugliest looking armies you're going to see on a battle report. I had about a week's notice before this tournament with a request to play VC. I have a long time collection that is accumulated from a number of different players, partially painted. So yeah, a few last minute purchases of models to actually fill out the list, left no time really at all to paint. The good news though is after this tournament I had about 3 days before the second one, and when we get around to my War Banner tournament you'll see a army that at least is painted and looks somewhat more cohesive. So apologies for this, but I thought I would get these out to you guys and let you hopefully see how we're going with VC and give me some good feedback that might be quite useful as we get on to the New Zealand Masters towards the end of this year. So game 1 was diagonal deployment and hold the centre, so pretty pleased with hold the centre, gives me a good chance to pick up an extra 3 points. One of the big differences I'm finding between playing Sylvan Elves and VC is a number of the secondary objectives are a lot easier for me to dominate and take advantage of. So on my right hand side you can see I've deployed some very ugly, strange looking zombies. No skeletons in this list, so wherever you see skeletons like that they're actually zombies. Unit of dogs there with the champion, Then my Ghoul unit, and then just across from there you can see the first of my Giant Bats and my Vampire Knights. The converted Empire cavalry model there is my second baby vampire with paired weapons and touch of greatness. Yeah, it was a bit too late ordering some vampire characters from overseas, and they didn't quite arrive in time for this tournament, but they will make an appearance at Warbanner. And then on the left hand side you can see the rest of my army there, so another unit of zombies at the back of the hill, a unit of bats, unit of dogs, and my other vampire knight list. And my general is attached to the first vampire knight unit. Put both in that unit initially because I was worried about alchemy and them allocating wounds onto my characters, but you'll see a few games into the future I will change tact a little bit with putting both characters in the same unit. So on to EJ's side of the table. From my left you can see he's got his engine, his first of his infantry with the flintlock axes, a couple of units of goblins in behind that with bows, then he's got his immortals and his Kadim out on the right hand side. He deployed a lot deeper than I thought he might, but not so far that I can't quickly get in his face and hopefully put enough pressure on him that he will kind of get in his own way and give me a few good charges and possible overruns or opportunities to fly my characters out of their units and assassinate his characters. So my vanguards moved both units of dogs forward. Plan's going to be to get them in the face, hopefully put some early pressure on with maybe a breath of corruption, but ultimately just slow him down and try and pin him in that corner where my vampires can get stuck into him. So after vanguards you can see I've advanced fairly aggressively, put my dogs in front of his engine, hoping he's going to go into them and then give my vampire knights a easy charge and then slowly grind him down. The other vampire knight unit has advanced up quite quickly, but I've kept a unit of bats in front. My thinking was to provide cover for my unit, or if he charges and then goes into my knights, even when I've been charged, I should still kill him in a turn, and I'm not really worried about being charged by any of his units front on. The ghouls have just moved up. Not really sure that they want much to do with any of his units really, with either armor or high damage output. I expect the ghouls to melt if they get into combat, but possibly they can hold for long enough that the vampires can come to their rescue. So moving on to magic, we pull out the big magic card turn 1. Wasn't really what we needed. It didn't really achieve a lot with magic, and we went on to his turn. I think I just summoned a couple of zombies in each unit, and that was about it. He stopped my magic missiles. So on EJ's turn, he didn't go into my dogs with his engine as I thought he would, and he didn't go into them with his infantry unit there either. He did charge my bats, and he did charge the dogs that were chaffing his immortals, and that was about all he really did. He did float around on the left hand side with his Kadim a little bit, but otherwise he pretty much held his position. In magic, with both Quicksilver Lash and Molten Copper, one is always going to go through. So turn 1 I chose to let Quicksilver Lash go through, didn't do too much damage, and then I was able to stop Molten Copper. A little bit of shooting, picked off a few wounds here and there, but generally nothing too disastrous. Actually, it wasn't his immortals that charged my dogs at the top there, it was his goblin unit. And in combat, both my dogs and my bats did significantly better than I expected, and what I wanted really. So I've ended up with the one bat on one wound, chaffing my own vampire knight unit there. I don't want to charge the characters out because if I win combat, then they are sitting ducks for his alchemy spells. And the dogs up the top there, they're holding the goblins up, but they also are kind of blocking anything I might want to advance and do as well. So a little bit awkward there. I've now kind of chaffed myself. But with him not charging my dogs, it's going to give me the opportunity to charge his engine, as it puts out very, very little damage once actually in combat, so I can probably hold him there for a few turns. So on my turn, we do charge the dogs in. The dogs should be able to hold the engine for a while, so the vampire knights that were waiting for the charge opportunity there, they move into the gap in between the bats and the dogs. Get ready to fight those immortals there. The other vampire knight unit with the characters is unfortunately rather stuck, so they just maneuver themselves ready to face the oncoming Kadim and possibly the immortals. We put the bats out in front, kind of encouraging them to charge me. Again, the opportunity for the vampire knights to then countercharge, or even if he overruns into me, I'm pretty comfortable with that fight. The zombies and the ghouls just in position there to make sure they're close enough for the hold the center, pick up the first point. And the zombies on the right hand side, they've just moved forward to hopefully hold the Kadim there, so I only have to fight one unit at a time for the next turn or so. In Magic, we pull up another big flux card. We try and create a few shenanigans with our breath weapons and our pentagram of pain, but we're not really able to, again, inflict all that much. We do manage to inflict a couple of wounds with the pentagram of pain on the infantry unit that was fighting the bats. I mentioned it incorrectly before too, that knight unit actually charged corner to corner with the infantry unit there in combat with the bats, and then with the pentagram of pain we actually finished off our own bat unit, I believe, from memory. And then that was about all that happened. We weren't able to heal the wound on our vampire knight unit, and that really was about all we achieved in combat. The dogs managed to survive a turn with the engine, which means now he will kill my dogs on his turn. The infantry unfortunately held against my vampire knight charge. With only one in combat, he was unfortunately always going to stay steadfast. The general has moved out of the unit, which I'm not entirely sure that was a very good idea. And my bats and zombies are still sitting there waiting to hopefully take some charges. So we move on to EJ's turn 2. So after much deliberation, EJ decided to make a couple of charges with his goblins. I was quite pleased that he charged my character. It will take me a couple of turns to grind those goblins down, but while I'm in combat there, he can't hurt me with alchemy, which was, after I moved him out of the unit, my biggest worry was he was going to kill me with alchemy. So quite glad to be back in combat. The flank charge into the bats hopefully is going to work out, and then I'll be able to charge those goblins in return with my night bus. On the right hand side, his Kadim unit did charge the zombies, which are hopefully going to hold for a little while. My plan was that I might be able to get some kind of an overrun after killing the goblins, but doesn't look like that's going to happen now, the way he has positioned. In Magic, what I have been afraid of for quite some time came to fruition, and you can see there is now an awful lot less vampire knights in that unit, just in behind my bats. I think from memory I tried to stop Quicksilver Lash and failed, and then I was unable to stop Molten Copper, and he managed to get both spells off. And even though I made a fair number of armor saves, I still lost a significant number of vampire knights, and that's really going to make things difficult for me now as we move on to the combat phase. So in combat, he manages to get Word of Iron off as well, and making that very, very difficult now for me to kill his infantry unit with the vamp knights. The Kadim butcher the zombies, but they do hold for a turn with 3 of them left. The goblins, as expected, destroyed the bats with their flank charge, and as expected I was unable to break either of those units in the middle. The vampire knights didn't take any losses, but also barely inflicted any casualties, and my vampire lord, despite slaughtering 6 goblins, they hang around and fight. And at this point I realized why EJ charged the goblins in, because now he has got a charge with his engine either into my vampire knight flank or the rear of my character, neither of which is going to be particularly nice for me to receive. So on to my next turn, I decide to charge my character out of the unit and in to help the vampire knights get rid of the infantry that are holding them up there in the center, and I charge the ghouls into the goblin unit. In magic, unfortunately I'm unable to achieve much once again, so we move very quickly on to the combat phase. On the right hand side, 3 zombies perish fairly quickly to the Kadim. In the center you can see we broke the infantry there, and I made the first of a number of poor options involving my characters in this tournament. I chose to pursue with my character. I knew I was in trouble regardless, as he was sitting in the open and I only have 2 wounds left, I believe. Almost certainly going to be killed with alchemy. Also the position I was in, likely the ghouls are going to be charged by the Kadim and then would potentially crumble, and then he could overrun into my lone character as well. So didn't have many good options, so I went for the overrun, chasing after his lone infantry guy there who fled, and I believe I needed a 10 to get out of charge arc, and I rolled just short of that unfortunately, and now I've offered him a flank charge, which is going to be the death of that character unfortunately. And in the same time you can see my vampire lord did not break the goblins once again, so now I'm highly likely to take a charge in the rear there, or possibly into the flank of the vampire knights, although they're almost at full strength so they can probably survive a turn. You can see I did actually manage to heal a wound or 2 perhaps on the other vamp knight unit that has moved around in preparation to charge the flank of that engine when he goes in on my character, but as you're going to see shortly, EJ decides not to make that charge. So you can see on EJ's turn the engine goes into the flank of my knights. I didn't feel too bad about this, as I figured my other knight unit would charge him and return into the flank. Also fairly hopeful my character will finish off the goblins this turn, and then he could turn around and take out the engine as well. The Kadim failed the charge on the ghouls, and the other Kadim have swung around ready to crush my army from that right hand flank. We wrap up some more points for hold the centre, so almost certain now to get the secondary, so that's some good news in amongst what is a bit of a mess at the moment. And unfortunately the 2 infantry that fled earlier in the game have rallied, and they're going to be sitting quite happily in the backfield. They're difficult to catch from here. So we go on to magic in combat. The engine rolled up max impact hits, then max wounds, and I promptly failed all of the armor saves, so we crumbled, and now that knight unit has died. And the vampire failed to break the goblins while I won combat. I didn't win by a huge amount, and he was able to hold on his leadership with a reroll. I think he needed a 4 or something, and he managed to pass that. And the lone infantry in the backfield I think also passed his test, also on a 4 or a 5. So luck kind of going with EJ on that turn. Hurt me quite a lot. My ghouls broke the other goblin unit. We chose not to pursue, as We had both those Kadim units coming in. My hope was I could raise a few goals and possibly hold the Kadim up for a turn while we hopefully kill the engine off. And finally, as expected, the immortal block with the characters promptly killed my vampire with a charge, flank, big flank, ranks, banner. No matter how much I won combat by against his champion, I was going to crumble. So yeah, rather unfortunate turn of events for me during that turn. So moving on to my turn, the knights charge into the flank of the engine. The ghouls charge into the small unit of 3 Kadim, hoping we can beat that unit and possibly overrun out of line of sight of the big block. My vampire finishes off the small goblin unit. The ghouls do a reasonable number on the Kadim, but not nearly as good as I needed. And again, EJ's luck is holding and he passes his leadership test. The field now looks a little bit of a mess for me here. The Kadim now going to get a flank on the ghouls. We don't kill the engine off with our knights, so we're stuck there. And that leaves his immortals to be able to come forward and cause me some problems. So unfortunately, the run of good leadership tests for EJ is now going to mean I haven't picked up nearly as many points as I would have liked to at this point. So move on to EJ's turn. So EJ charges into the flank of the ghouls with his Kadim as expected. His goblin unit manages to rally. The lone infantry guy though does run off the board. The immortals charge forward but fail to make a fail to roll high enough to get the charge onto my vampire. Again, between the vampire and the knights, we fail to kill the engine. I think he's left on 1 wound, which again, very unfortunate. If we'd managed to break that, we would have been able to charge with the knights and the character into the immortals. So as it stands now, not really looking in a great position. So we move on to my turn, and on the upside at least we have won the secondary. So on my turn, we finally kill the engine. My character overruns through into a fair bit of safety from his immortals. The knights reform so that they can chaff his immortals, and that is all we are about to achieve on our turn. Moving on to EJ's turn, he charges into my zombie block on the hill with his Kadim, who had killed the ghouls on the previous turn, charges into my vampire knights with his immortals, and promptly destroys both units. So we finish the game at that point with just my general alive, which wasn't too good at all. It worked out to a 15-5 for EJ. Fortunately for me, I got the secondary, so I went back to a 12-8 loss, which all in all I probably would have taken at the beginning of the game. While alchemy was an issue and it did kill off a fair number of knights, it wasn't quite as big a factor on the game as I would have thought. A much bigger factor was my bad play, getting my knights stuck in behind my own units, getting them stuck on the engine, getting stuck on the goblins, having my characters out of the units in the open. Really made a number of bad choices in this game, but I'd only had I think 3 or 4 games with this army prior to the tournament. Haven't really played VC a lot, and not for a good 7 or 8 months. So yeah, it was a lot of learning how to make this army work. You'll see next couple of games I make a number of the same mistakes before starting to get my head around how this works. So apologies for not quite as many photos and struggling to remember some of the information. Had 11 games in a 1-week period with 2 tournaments, and a lot to try and remember and keep track of. Hopefully the following battle reports I'll be a little bit clearer. Been trying to speed my play up a bit, not make as many notes and take as many photos, so hopefully we will see the quality still reasonably good without me struggling to get through all my game turns. So good game against EJ. Always enjoy playing him. He's a fantastic opponent. Always plays well, always a tough game, and always a pleasure to play against with his positive, good sportsmanship. So well done, EJ, on a good win. I was probably lucky to get away with 8 points. So we move on to game 2. Hopefully get that out to you guys within the next couple of days. I'll be playing a familiar Highborn Elf opponent, Erdem. And again, he's rocking Alchemy, so yeah, going to be another tough matchup. The two lists that I was most concerned about at this tournament, getting game 1 and game 2, going to probably see me sitting in the lower part of the field by the end of day 1. So hope you guys have enjoyed. Like if you haven't, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.